Welcome to C Programming Tutorials. This tutorial is a production of YouTube channel Learnorama, Learnorama, and the Facebook page Awesome C Programming Tutorials in High Def. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, I would recommend that you do so, and if you haven't become the fan of the Facebook page, I would recommend that you do so as well. We are basically, in today's tutorial, we are learning about how to pass arrays as parameters to function, and this is actually part 3 of this tutorial. So the link to part 1 must be displayed on the screen right now. If you haven't watched the first 2 parts, I would recommend that you watch them first by clicking on the link. So let's get started. So we are basically, in this tutorial, we are writing a program that would basically add all the number of days in each of the months together to get the total number of days in a year. And for this, we are basically we have declared an array here, and we have initialized it with all the number of days in the corresponding months, and then we are basically calling into a function and passing the array just like that. And this, we are assuming that this function is going to return that by adding all these numbers together, and it will return the sum back to the caller, and we are going to capture that sum in this variable n days in year, and then we basically print this out. So our main function is complete. The only task is remaining, the subtask, if you will, is remaining. That's remaining is basically writing or defining this function, how it's going to basically take the array and add individual elements of that array to compute the total number of days in the year. So here we are. So we basically have declared the prototype, and this is how you actually pass the array to a function as a parameter. And this is only one way of doing that. We will learn another way, and this is basically passing it by value, which basically very similar to passing an integer, a simple integer, by value. When you declare it that way, what happens is basically it copies the value from the caller. Like in this case, it's going to copy the entire array from here into here. And when in this function, this array, the values of this array, all these values will be accessible by this name. Okay, and this is called passing the array by value, or passing the parameter by value. Why? Because you copied the values over, and this also implies that if inside it, if you change any of those elements, it's not going to change any of the elements of the caller itself. Okay, so let's not worry about that. Let's basically try to let's try to implement this function. Okay, how it's going to basically add all these elements together. So it's pretty simple, right? All we have to do, we already know that there are total number of 12 elements in this array. Okay, and we have to add each one of them together. So since we know that we have to add individual elements, we have to visit every element in this array one by one, and we know the total number of elements in this array. The best thing to do when this thing happens is basically to use a for loop. Okay, not the while loop, for loop. Why? Because we know how many times we have to go through this array. It's 12. Okay, so in this case we are going to we are going to use the for loop. So first thing we have to do is to basically declare the counter for this for loop, and then we start writing the for loop. Okay, for I is equal to 0. If you still remember, in one of the tutorials long ago, we basically learned how to write for loops. For I is equal to 0, I is less than, then comes the condition. First, initialization of the counter variable, loop counter variable. This is called loop counter variable. This is where we have defined it. First initialization, we will start with 0, because this will also represent the index of each of the elements. So let's call it index. Okay, and then it's always good to name the variables with the name that that particular variable represents. Okay, for index equal to 0, index is less than how many? 12. Should I write less than or less than equal to? Correct, less than, because we know that even though there are 12 elements, the index starts from 0 and runs all the way to 1 less than the total number of elements, which is gonna be 11. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So index has to run from 0 to 11. So less than 12. Okay, index is less than 12. Index plus plus. This way index starts from 0 and this loop runs until the index becomes greater than or equal to 12. In other words, it keeps on running for as long as this condition is met, for as long as index is less than 12, and then for every time when it runs, it loops, the value of index is incremented by 1. And what do we do in the body of the for loop? In the body of the for loop, we are going to basically add each of the elements together. Okay, so whatever the current element is, which would be represented by, which can be accessed like this by using the index of that array, by indexing into that array, that's what we call indexing into the array, to basically access the individual elements. So the value of index would be 0, we'll be accessing the first element. The value of index would be 1, we'll be accessing the second element, and so on. And we basically put it in some variable called sum. Okay, and what we're going to do is basically whatever the current sum is, the last sum, we basically keep on adding that on top of it. Okay, that's how we accumulate all the values together into a sum. Okay, and we basically assign that to sum itself so that we can use it in the next loop around. Okay, and this statement can also be written in short like this: sum plus equal to days of index. It's exactly the same statement. Okay, it's just a fancier way of writing it, but it is recommended when you are writing C program, you do it this way. This results in more efficient code when the compiler compiles it. Well, nowadays all the compilers are very smart, so it really doesn't matter. Anyway, so this is how you do it. Okay, this will actually compute the sum of all those elements together. Okay, and for that you will, before we do this, we also have to, we forgot to basically okay, so yeah, so sorry for the distraction, I have to pause it for a little bit. You probably can't notice it, but anyway, so we have to so we have to declare this variable. And one more important thing that you have to do, since it basically keeps on adding into the previous value, it is very important to basically initialize it to 0, so that it is 0 when it starts in the beginning. Okay, and let me start bring up my pen here to represent what's going on here. Let's see, let me plug it in here. So okay, so this is the array. Okay, it has all these elements here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. We are running out of time here. I'm kind of panicking. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on to 11, right? And then there is this variable called sum, right? This variable right here, sum, and we have initialized it to 0. And this element contains 31, this element contains 28, 31, 30, and so on. And then first time when this is going to execute, sum equal to sum plus days, which means that whatever the value of sum is, you add the days of index 0, which is the 0th element here, and you add this in here, right here, and that basically gives you, is going to give the sum, and then assign it back to sum. So we are gonna stop here because we are running out of time. Thank you so much.